We dumped the car in one of the overcrowded LAX parking lots. Lot C, in fact. There was real joy in not worrying about finding a parking place, and an even greater pleasure in not worrying about remembering it. We only had to hop a single fence to get where we were going, and the time-honored tradition of hijackers, and Ken didn't weigh very much. A thought crossed my mind. So, one of us knows how to fly a plane, right?
Better than flying it wrong,
Arlene said. No time for jarhead humor, I said. Give me an answer.
Funny,
said Arlene, quite seriously.
but I was about to ask the same question, really.
We both looked at Albert.
I'd been planning to take lessons, but I never got around to it,
he admitted sadly. Well, how hard can it be? I asked, recalling the words of an old movie character. We infiltrated the refueling area for the big jets, and I found the perfect candidate, an ancient C-5 Air Force transport, which could easily make it all the way to Hawaii, assuming somebody could drive it. Everybody was already doing a good zombie performance, although I still thought Jill was overdoing it. Ken was propped between Albert and me, and we were able to make it look like he was stumbling along with us. We prepared to tramp up the ramp, joining a herd of other zombies. A pair of Clydes waited at the entrance. Damn the luck. We could pass for zombies among zombies, but I wasn't at all sure about these guys. They were disarming each zombie as it entered the plane. It was a perfectly reasonable precaution, considering how zombies acted in close quarters when they were jostled, pushed, pulled, or damn near anything else. I couldn't blame the Clydes for not wanting the plane to be suddenly depressurized, but the idea of being disarmed was not at all appealing. We did some shifting around, then hit the ramp with myself in the lead, the other four right behind me, four abreast with Jill and Ken on the inside. Jill did as good a job as I had of keeping Ken's end up. This makeshift plan could work if the Clydes were bored. Sure enough, they barely paid attention, as we simply took our heavy artillery and tossed them on the pile outside the plane. Bye-bye, shotgun. This left us with nothing but the pistols hidden inside our jackets. We stuck close to each other, lost in the zombie mob, as the plane started to taxi. Then we worked our way up front. The Clydes were in the back, huddled and talking about something. By the time the plane lifted off, giving me that rush I always get from takeoff, we were close enough to the front that we could duck behind the curtain leading to the cockpit door. I took it on myself to give it a gentle push. The door opened inward, revealing a pair of imps hovering over a strange globe. Another product of alien technology vaulted to the floor. The monsters appeared to be driving the plane through the use of this pulsing, humming, buzzing ball. It gave me a headache just looking at it. Biotech made me need a Pepto-Bismol. The glistening, sweating device was connected to the instrument panel. The imps' backs were to us. They were so preoccupied with their task, they didn't even turn around when we entered. I closed the door quietly and locked it. From the cockpit, I saw Venus. We were going the wrong way. Due east! This simply would not do. I pointed at the imps, and then at Arlene. She nodded. We stepped forward, pistols in hand, and the barrel of our guns touched the back of the imp heads at exactly the same instant. The little voice in the back of my head chose that instant to open its fat yap and suggest that Arlene and I should say something to the imps on the order of, "We're hijacking this plane to Hawaii." We never did have a proper honeymoon. But there was no way to give an imp orders other than, "Fall down, you're dead." We'd simply take over the plane after we killed the imps. I'm certain that Arlene and I fired at the same moment. The idle thoughts passing through my mind couldn't have affected the results. But something went wrong. The imp Arlene tapped went down and stayed down. She put 2 more bullets in him, almost by reflex, to make certain that the job was good and done. I should have been able to take care of one lousy imp. After the way we'd exterminated ridiculous numbers of zombies, demons, ghosts, and pumpkins, one lousy imp at the closest possible range. The head turned ever so slightly as I squeezed the trigger. Somehow the bullet went in at an angle, but didn't put the imp down. Turning around, screaming, it flung one flaming snot ball. One lousy snot ball. I dived to the left. Arlene was already out of the line of fire on the right, taking care of the other one. Jill crouched, fingers stuck in her ears, trying to keep out the loud reverberations of the shots in the enclosed space. Albert could have done the same, but Albert froze. As much of a pro as he was, he stood there with the dumb expression of a deer caught in the headlights, right before roadkill. Maybe Albert had a little voice in the back of his head, and it had chosen that moment to bug him. Or maybe it was such a foregone conclusion that these imps were toast. He'd let down his guard, taking a brief mental rest at precisely the wrong moment. The fireball struck him, dead center in the face. I remembered losing Bill Rich that way. It didn't seem right to survive all the firepower this side of the goddamned sun and then cash in on something so trivial. It made me so mad. The cockpit vanished in a haze of red. It was like I'd mainlined another dose of that epinephrine stuff from Demos. I dropped my gun and jumped on the imp, beating at it with my fists, tearing at it with my teeth. I was screaming louder than poor Albert, writhing on the floor, holding his face. Hands were on me from behind, trying to pull me off. Little hands. Jill was behind me, yelling something in my ear I couldn't understand. But the part of me that didn't want to hurt Jill won out over the part that wanted to rip the imp apart with my fingernails. Letting go seemed a bad idea, though. There'd be nothing stopping it from tossing the fireballs to fry us all. Then I heard Arlene shouting something about a clear shot, and I suddenly remembered the invention of firearms. The caveman jumped out of the way to give Cockpit Annie the target she wanted. She pumped round after round into the imp's open mouth. He never closed it. He never raised his claw hands again. Of course, while we were encountering these difficulties, there was a commotion outside. I guess we had made a bit of noise. One of the zombies tried the door. The lock held for now. Sanity returned, and I helped the blinded Albert get up, casually noticing that he hadn't taken any of the flaming stuff down his throat or nose. He might live. In the distance we heard gunshots and curses. The Clydes must have been forcing their way forward, shooting any zombies in their way. Suddenly I was grateful that the plane was a sardine can of solid, reworked flesh.
Okay, moment of truth,
said Arlene, the mantle of command falling on her there and then. It's not something I'd wish on my worst enemy.
Who's going to fly this damned thing?
She asked in the tones of a demand, not a question. The gunshots crept close. We had perhaps a minute.
I will,
said Jill in a small voice, but with confidence. I remembered her stint in the truck with some trepidation. Then I remembered how she'd stayed behind the wheel after a missile tried to take her head off. You didn't tell us you could fly one of these, I said, getting my voice back.
You didn't ask,
she said. It sounded like one of those old comedy routines, but without a laugh track. It wasn't funny. Jill, I said, have you ever flown a plane before?
Kind of?
Kind of? What the hell does that mean? A zombie threw itself against the door, where Albert still moaned. He braced himself, still fighting, still a part of the team. She sighed.
Okay, I haven't really flown, but I'm a wizard at all the different flight simulators.
Arlene and I stared at each other with mounting horror. I hated to admit it, even to myself. but my experience bringing down the mail rocket, with a high-tech program helping every mile of the way, probably qualified me less to fly the C-5 than Jill with her simulators. "All right," I said to Arlene.
"Right,"
she answered, shrugging, then went to hook up Ken. I helped Jill look for jacks on the glistening biotech. She was more willing to touch it than I was. She found what she needed and plugged Ken into the system. The operation went smoothly. He'd been designed for the purpose. Jill called up Sim Flight on her Compomac and tapped furiously, connecting it to Ken, then to the actual plane. A moment later, she spoke with that triumphant tone of voice that rarely let us down.
"Got it! We have control!"
The gunshots suggested the Clydes were getting closer, and more heavy bodies were beginning to throw themselves against the cockpit door. I was about to make a suggestion when Albert beat me to it. He was down, but not out.
"Godspeed,"
whispered Albert, still covering his eyes.
"Now, why don't you purge all the air from the cabin, daughter?"
Raising my eyebrows, I silently mouthed "daughter" to Arlene, but she shook her head. Albert obviously meant it generically. He was much too young to be her real father. Faster and faster, Jill typed away. Then, the raging, surging sounds behind the door grew dimmer and dimmer, finally fading away to nothing. Modern death by keyboard. We were already at 40,000 feet and climbing. Up there was little air to sustain even zombies. And Clydes, human real or human fake, had a human need for plenty of O2.
"Well done, daughter,"
said Albert. He could hear just fine. Having come this close to buying it, I could hardly believe we were safe again. A coughing fit came out of nowhere and grabbed my heart. Arlene put her arm around me and said,
"Your turn to sleep again."
I didn't argue. I noticed that Albert was already snoozing. Sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care. And I felt too lousy and too guilty somehow to stay under for long. Less than a half hour later, I was awake again. Jill had turned around, crossed the coastline, and was over the ocean. All was well with the world for a few seconds longer.
"Holy hell! We're losing airspeed!"
She suddenly screamed, jerking us all awake.
"We're losing altitude!"
It's always something. The engines strained and whined, making the noises they would if headed into a ferocious headwind. But there was no wind. With a big whoomp, one engine flamed out. Jill wasn't kidding about the quality of her simulator exercises. She instantly dived to the plane to restart it. Then she headed back, circling around to try again. "Stupid monster mechanics!" I yelled. "Dumbass demon dildo ground crew! How the hell do these idiots intend to conquer the world when they can't even—"
"Shut up!"
Jill shouted. I shut up. She was right. I could be pissed off all I wanted after she saved our collective asses. 2 more tries and she was white-faced.
It's some kind of field," she said. "We can't go west. So, that's how they're conquering the world,"
said Arlene calmly. I took my medicine like a good boy.